Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast, the podcast that aims to be exactly what it says. I'm your host, Onouphrios Dovlepis, and together we'll discover the not-so-frequently told stories of Greece's history that will change the way you view things forever. Hello, and welcome to my podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the connection between Scream and ancient Greek tragedies. The first Scream movie, released in late 1996, was a surprise success and a landmark for horror slasher films. One of my favorite movies of all times, by the way, which I might have watched like 10 times. It went on to generate a franchise with 6 movies so far, anyway, in late 2024 when I'm recording this podcast. The 1997 sequel performed as well as the first movie at the box office and made $172 million. And of all the Scream movies, this, Scream 2, is the one that has some intriguing parallels and connections to ancient Greek tragedies. So what's your favorite scary tragedy? First of all, the central role of fate and inevitability. Those incredible 2,500-year-old Greek tragedies often revolve around characters trying to escape a seemingly inevitable fate. But of course, those characters fall victim to it due to external forces, due to their own faults, or due to their parents' fault. In Scream, we explore the inevitability of death as Sidney Prescott, obviously the protagonist, to use the Greek word for main character, is attacked by Billy because her mother had an affair with his father. By the way, character is a Greek word as well. In Scream 2, Sidney tries to live a normal life after surviving the events of the first movie. Despite her efforts, she is drawn back into this vicious cycle. That is exactly the inevitability of fate in Greek tragedy that I mentioned earlier. Revenge as a driving force. Revenge in Greek tragedy is a central theme. One such example is the Orestia by Aeschylus, which is even shown in the film. The characters pursue vengeance, which leads to cycles of violence and destruction. But we'll get to this in more detail later. In Scream 2, Mrs. Loomis seeks revenge against Sidney for the death of her son, one of the killers in the first film. Her actions perpetuate the violence, the same way that vengeance causes tragedy in the ancient plays. Chorus-like commentary. In ancient Greek tragedies, the chorus serves as a narrative device. It comes from the Greek word choros. Choros means dance. Keep in mind that dancing was really integral to the ancient plays, and theater in Greece began mainly as a ritual to honor the god of wine, Dionysus. The first part of the theater itself was this part which most people nowadays think is the stage, which might be circular or semicircular, and it's not elevated. That is the part that we call orchestra. Orchestra obviously became the word orchestra, but in Greek it means dance floor. And we call, I guess, the group of people playing music orchestra because they perform below the stage. That's where the choros would have been in antiquity, as opposed to the actors who were a little bit higher on the stage, which was elevated. The choros, or chorus, in English, comment on the events, offering moral insight and reflecting the audience's emotions. In Scream 2, we have this meta-commentary on horror movies provided by characters like Randy, which kind of does the same thing. Randy analyzes the rules of sequels and horror films, offering insight into the events and foreshadowing the characters' fates. This mirrors the role of the ancient chorus. Catharsis through fear and pity. Aristotle defined tragedy as evoking pity and fear in the audience, which would lead to something called catharsis in Greek. In English, we call this catharsis, but it's pronounced actually catharsis. That means purging. It really means emotional release for the audience. In Scream 2, the horror elements evoke fear, while Sidney's suffering and attempts to overcome her trauma create pity. The audience experiences catharsis through Sidney's resilience and the resolution of the killer's motives. Nevertheless, Sidney once more loses some of her loved ones, so the character doesn't come out of this totally unscathed. The role of women. The Greek tragedies usually centered strong but suffering female protagonists. For example, Antigone, Electra. Scream 2 also portrays Sidney as a resilient figure that handles danger loss and moral dilemmas. Then we also have Gail Weathers, who is kind of like the counterpart of Sydney. A very strong, powerful woman, but I would say more opportunistic. Keep in mind that in antiquity, the roles were played always by men, no matter what it was, men or women. So all these tragedies that we mentioned, where we have Antigone, Electra, Clytemnestra, Medea, and so on, it was always men, but always wearing masks. Theater as a setting. In Scream 2, the climactic scene takes place on a theater stage, which is, by the way, elevated from the audience. The theatrical setting underscores the performative nature of the killer's actions, who are in costume anyway. In the Greek tragedies, the actors that were called hypocrites, that's where the word hypocrite comes from, always wore masks, as I told you, just like the killer in Scream wears a mask. In ancient Greece, though, no murder was ever performed on stage for people to watch, not even a pretend murder, let alone a real one, as, for example, in the Colosseum in Rome. And finally, let's get to the play that is actually depicted in the film, which is what this episode is really about. The Orestia is a trilogy of plays written by Aeschylus in Athens in the 5th century BC, so 2,500 years ago. Aeschylus had fought against the Persians during their invasion of Greece in 480 BC. That battle is known, where he mainly fought, as the battleship of Salamis. That is the battle that defined the ancient world, but that is a different podcast. His play Orestia is one of the most significant works of Greek drama, and it's unique because it's the only surviving trilogy that we have from the ancient world. Presenting plays in the form of trilogies was the norm in ancient Athens, which came up with theater to begin with. By the way, in case I haven't said that, Athens was the birthplace of theater, and the first theater in the world you can see when you visit Athens and you go to the Acropolis. So trilogies meant 3 plays focusing on different parts of the same story. The trilogies were performed as part of the annual festival to honor Dionysus, the god of wine and theater. So the theater at the Acropolis is called the Theater of Dionysus, or Bacchus. It's the same god. That was the same name, by the way, that was used by the Greeks, not a Roman name. Aeschylus won first prize with this trilogy at the festival in 458 BC. He had won again in 472 with what would come to be the oldest surviving tragedy in the world, the Persians. He fought against them and he lived to write a play about them. It's really interesting how that play, by the way, is not about the Greeks. It doesn't have any Greek character in it. It's only Persians, and about how they suffered from their defeat by the Greeks. Aeschylus is the definitive father of tragedy. So his trilogy explores themes of justice, vengeance, and the consequences of moral corruption. The 3 plays that are part of the trilogy are Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides. Agamemnon, the first play, centers on the return of King Agamemnon from the Trojan War. He comes back with the Trojan Cassandra as his concubine, to say it politely. He's murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, as revenge for his sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia to the gods, of course, in order to ensure victory in the war. The play deals with Clytemnestra's desire for vengeance. The second play, The Libation Bearers, Hoiphori in Greek. The second play focuses on the revenge of Agamemnon's children, Orestes and Electra. So the first play was about the mother's vengeance. The second one is about the children's vengeance now. Orestes avenges his father's murder by killing Clytemnestra, his mother. The third play, the final play, shifts the focus to the aftermath of Orestes' crime, pursued by the Furies, the goddesses of vengeance. So more vengeance. Even the gods will take revenge in this case. They seek to punish him for matricide, and Orestes seeks refuge in Athens. The play introduces the concept of a trial taking place by the Acropolis of Athens. Again, the Acropolis is present. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, establishes a court of law to decide the fate of Orestes. Ultimately, the young man is acquitted and the cycle of vengeance comes to an end, finally. These are stories, by the way, that I've also mentioned in the episode about Dune and its connection to Greece, where the title character of Dune, Paul Atreides, the surname, I'm talking about the surname, he is named after this specific family that killed each other. The trilogy of Aeschylus is considered a cornerstone of Western literature. At Sydney's school now, they're doing a Greek tragedy, and Sydney has landed the leading role as Cassandra. Her drama teacher says, "At the risk of sounding like a college drama teacher, if you've got pain around this kind of material, use it. This is your role, Sid. Cassandra is one of the great tragic visionaries of literature. She saw it all coming. The wars, the murder, the madness. She knew she was cursed. It was her fate, and she embraced it. None of us can avoid our fate, but as an artist, you can honestly face it and fight." But what is he really talking about? Cassandra in Greek mythology was the Trojan princess and priestess of Apollo. She was gifted with the power of prophecy, but when she said no to Apollo's advances, she was cursed so that no one would believe her predictions. She foresaw the fall of Troy, but was ignored. After the fall of Troy, she was taken as a slave by Agamemnon and later killed by Clytemnestra, his wife, who also killed him. By the way, Sydney and Cassandra's names even share some of the same letters. Keep in mind, Sandra comes from this, so Sydney and Sandra are almost the same name. So we have SDN and SND. I'm just saying this, obviously coincidence. The name of Sydney has been chosen already since the first film, and maybe without having in mind this specific play and character for the second film. Do note that we have a play within the film, so we have theater within the film, and also a film within the film. Scream 2 shows the events of the first movie through another movie called Stab. So out of the three plays, the play that we really see in Scream 2 is Agamemnon, the first part of the trilogy. At some point in the film, they're rehearsing for this play, and we hear Cassandra's prophecy about her own death. "No crime against gods or man have I committed, save to speak the truth. And each hideous vision born from my mind has come to pass. Troy has fallen, not by my hand or wish, but as I foresaw. So now, fate's vengeful eye is fixed on me." During the rehearsal and amidst the chaos, Ghostface, the killer, is wearing another costume just like the ones that the chorus is wearing. Sydney sees Ghostface in this madness and finally collapses. I think this probably is the best scene in Scream 2, and Neve Campbell looked her absolute best. So Neve, if you're listening, I totally loved that scene and you looked amazing, and that was a great performance. As Scream Wiki says, the climax of this film about familial murder and revenge plays out on the side of the play about familial murder and revenge. The Orestia is a trilogy that appears in the second installment of the Scream franchise, which would later become a trilogy of its own in 2000. And by the way, this is how it was conceived, as a trilogy. Nevertheless, so far there have been, as we said in the very beginning, 6 films, and there's one more coming up in 2026. So finally, Scream 2 mirrors ancient Greek tragedies, as we said. It uses a modern horror framework to evoke themes that have resonated since antiquity, with a theatrical climax, chorus-like commentary, and tragic inevitability reminiscent of the great Greek dramas. These connections deepen the narrative's impact, making this film not just another slasher sequel. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.